Welcome to the show, Dane. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure, man. Thank you for having me, Callum. It's all good.
So you're probably best known for being a comedian, being a comedy writer. But
hmm
where did all this come from? Was there a time when you thought, I want to be a comedian, or did you just stumble upon it?
I think it's a mixture of both for me. I mean, I always liked comedy as a genre of entertainment. Like, obviously, like most people, are music fans or video game fans. But I think, yeah, there was just something about comedy that really drew it to me. I guess I got immersed in it in the early days, like I suppose early 90s. I kind of used to like watching the sketch shows and watch all the old school stuff like French and Saunders and Hale and Pace and Cannon and Ball. Then seeing the Real McCoy being one of the first Afro-Caribbean sketch show, it seemed a lot more relatable and close to home. So I was massively interested in it. But I think for me, my awakening as a comedian came when I was 15. I went with my friend and I went to a theatre in Southeast London in Catford to watch a showcase with 3 comics. And the first comic was a guy called Leah Mohammed, who was on the Real McCoy. And I remember him being great and some of his jokes he had. Like, I think even my first 5 minutes as a comedian was kind of like a Frankenstein monster of the stuff he did. The second comic that was on was a relatively unknown person at the time called Russell Peters, who's now the world's largest stand-up comedian. And then D.L. Hughley, who appeared on The Fix on Netflix and then also was the host of BET's Comic View. So he used to host, like, I guess, the equivalent of Live at the Apollo in the States for, like, African Americans and stuff. And, yeah, I remember watching it. And I remember D.L. Hughley ripping the piss out of me and my friend. And, yeah, I just fell in love with the whole thing. I was just like, this is amazing. Like, I want to do this. And I think it had reminded me of a previous experience I'd had when I must have been like 8 or 9, where we'd do skits for assembly and we'd have to perform in school assembly.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like, I guess I was quite a disruptive, rebellious child at school. Well, not too disruptive, but more class clown. And I just loved that when you performed in assembly, you had the attention of all the school, kids are laughing and teachers can't tell you to be quiet. So I'd already liked the power that came with and the freedom that came with. And yeah, seeing it again at 15, I was like, this is what I want to do. But living in England, there was very few, if none, precedents so far as replicating the kind of style of comedy I wanted to do. Because then after that, I started getting into like Chris Rock, listening to audio albums by him and George Carlin and Eddie Griffin. And yeah, there just weren't any equivalents of that in the UK. So I was like, okay, well, that's more of an American thing. I do spend some time in the States. But yeah, I just enjoyed it. And then I just was still carrying on doing normal things or the things I thought I should be doing, like, you know, going to university and studying and stuff. And that went okay. And I was working up until, like, I guess 2008 when the credit crunch happened. And I was kind of like, well, you know, one of the biggest hurdles I'd had for doing comedy in earnest was the fact that I'd watched so many black creatives in like films and autobiographies and, like, you know, biopics where they'd chosen these creative pursuits and they're not been able to support their families and stuff, and their family had suffered. And I was like, I'm never going to be that selfish to try and chase my dreams and screw my family over. So it was like, I like doing comedy, but I have to have a real job so I can provide for my family. And that was a decision I made in 2000. And then by 2008, when the credit crunch happened, I was like, you see, there's no such thing as a stable job because a lot of people are losing theirs now. And I just thought, you know what? This comedy thing is still in the back of my head. And I gave it a go in 2006. And then I kind of went back to work and I was like, you know what? Maybe give this a go in earnest and actually throw all of your potential and your focus on it and see what happens. And yeah, 2010, I quit my job at Auto Trader and I did a creative writing course. Then I studied improv. I did an improv workshop and I did an acting workshop and I did some stand-up. And I went to this place called the Comedy School, which is based in Camden. And it's a great place that does like outreach programs for, like, you know, kids from like troubled teens from schools and vulnerable teens, as well as outreach to like prison programs to use comedy as, like, you know, able to help them, like, I suppose, yeah, just help them out really. And they also ran these improv courses. And I remember sitting to the guys and talking about it and saying, I really love comedy. I've done it before and I want to do it. And they were like, well, how many times have you gigged? And I was like, I don't know, like 4. And they were like, don't sound like you love it. So they were like, if you sign up and, you know, apply yourself, see what happens. And I did that, yeah, 2010. And we had a showcase at the end where you invite your friends down. And I guess I felt like, well, because the feedback from most of my family members about doing comedy full time had not been massively positive. So I also didn't want to rely on the bias of having my friends down and perform a set. So I did the set, and then afterwards they were like, now you can go on to perform at open mic. And they gave us a list of gigs that we could do. And the rest is history. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started. So as I say to people, just a short answer is just that, like, I guess I was like a closet comedian. So I was a comedian, but I was in a closet. And then, I came out 2010 and just decided to live my truth.
So how was it doing the credit crunches? You sort of look for the best in a bad situation, really. It was sort of quite eye-opening. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, kind of eye-opening to an extent. But also for me, it was more, I suppose, really beginning to take in the comedian philosophy and that you can't really take things too seriously. And I guess the credit crunch helped that because it was almost like a philosophical revelation for me, where it's like, even something like work, which people put so much of their life and self-esteem onto, can be taken away from you like that. So how seriously can you take it? Whereas, if you do comedy, you can just give it a go and fuck it up and then come back to doing this. And you never, at least with comedy, you never know what's going to happen. Whereas when you work up and go to the same job every day, you got a pretty good idea of how the day's going to go. And I kind of just said to myself, even then, like, again, philosophically, it was, if I'm going to be a dad someday, I don't want to be the kind of dad that says to my kids, well, I could have done this if it weren't for having kids. I had to look after my family. And I also didn't want to be like a showbiz parent that lives vicariously through my child. I just wanted to live my own life so I could just be a better person to the people that I'd be around. Same thing for like a wife and stuff as well. I never wanted to be someone that got to like 40 years old and then started going mental at my wife because I didn't get to do my dreams. So that was another motivation for me. But it was just like, just try to approach life without, overthinking stuff and just doing something you want. I just felt I don't have any kids or any dependents and any kind of real financial obligations like a mortgage. So just, do something you love with your life, man. Do something fun. And I just wanted to kind of exemplify that by actually giving it a go.
Yeah, and you certainly did. So when you first started seriously starting going to gigs, open mics, how were you feeling in the early days?
Early days, I was pretty excited. I guess on reflection, I'd say that the open mic is probably the hardest part of your entry into comedy because it's held together in such a fragile fashion that a circuit is just it's almost generous to refer to it as a circuit because essentially for a lot of gigs, it's just a room with a PA system or a microphone system that's below a pub, at the back of a pub, above a pub, and you will perform, if you're lucky, up to audiences as much as 20 people, 30 people. But of that 20 or 30 early on, half of those people will be other comedians. And because they're other comedians in a lonely art form, they all get intimidated because they don't want your set to be better than theirs because they're trying to make themselves stand out and distinguish themselves from the other 19 people they're performing with. Or they bring their friends down so they're going to get the bias, which I feel like, while I understand why you'd want your friends to come along for support, I think, yeah, but you're almost setting yourself up for failure because if your friends are sycophants and they're laughing at stuff that's not funny, then you're just going to get to the point where they're not going to be around and you're going to find out that you're not as funny as your friends tell you are, and you guys are all going to be resentful of each other. So, yeah, the open mic thing, it was so exciting because, like, it's like you're giving it a go and you're meeting other people who are like-minded. And I think for a lot of people in comedy, like, it works because some people are aspiring comics. You've got recently divorced people who are lonely and want something to do in the evenings. You've got like high-functioning alcoholics, low-functioning alcoholics, and just, a group of lonely people, especially because I kind of began the London circuit where, in a busy metropolis, there's a lot of lonely people out there that want a way to entertain themselves after work. So, yeah, it's a collection of a real motley crew of customers and, and acquaintances. But, I liked it. But, yeah, it was just hard because it's a very low barrier to entry. And by that token, it means that the quality control isn't the best because everybody thinks they're a comedian. So I guess it's wading through the mire of the aforementioned groups was probably one of the harder parts. But again, it's fun. It's fun to kind of just do something you enjoy to an audience that want to hear you. So yeah, it was hard. The hardest part, kind of, if I'm honest, is, like I said, it's the low barriers to entry and the kind of, I guess, the kind of weird aesthetics you see in a comedy club, and then the other part being that it doesn't pay any money whatsoever, and trying to explain to other adults why you drove to Leicester for £20 is it's a hard pitch.
Yeah, because I can imagine there's a lot more work that goes into it than most people are aware. Like you said, you drive to different gigs and you do it, it's not like you get taken there. It's not you get paid to it. You do it to try and build yourself up.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it gets to the point where you can get paid for it, and it doesn't get to the point where people can drive you. But yeah, early on, it's really about that test of your metals, whether you can do this without there being any financial motivation. Because yeah, I think a lot of people see it as in, I show up, I do 20 minutes, I get paid, I go home. And what I don't see is like, if I'm out of town, it's getting ready beforehand. It's like, I remember driving to Lincolnshire uni for like It's like a 7-hour road trip. It's 3.5 hours there, 3.5 hours back. You might want to stop for services. If you're carpooling with other people, they may need to stop anyway. Also, because people are on other points in the bill, it means you have to leave together. You can't leave out until the last person finishes, which means you may not get home until 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And then even then, you still got to go to work in the morning. And then there's eating in between that as well, having the money to do so, depending on how much you got paid or how much you have to reinvest in your business, whether it's through petrol. And then it's obviously because you are open mic, and like I said, the sheer level of saturation within the industry, even if they don't go with you, there's like another 10 people that will take that spot. So you have to, on top of all that, make sure before you have representation, you're networking with promoters to get feedback on how you can improve and how to be in better favor to get rebooked for those same people. So you're basically trying to establish your networks and get work from a very early point on, which has definitely yielded a lot of success for me now. But yeah, at the time, just a lot of grueling work, and not everyone necessarily wants to put in that level of work. But for me, it was kind of like I was aware of the alternative, because I guess unlike a lot of my peers, I know what it's like to have a normal job and to work a job whereby it's not the job you do until comedy takes off. It's like the job you do to provide for your family. So, for me, I'd say, the beginnings of comedy for me were just insanely liberating and fun, because I was like, I had to be at a desk. So for me, it was kind of like being told, you're paralyzed from the waist down, and then one day you can start walking. So people will tell you to crawl and stuff, but if you've been in a wheelchair and now you can walk, you're going to run and jump and do everything you can, because now you've got legs. So that's kind of how I felt about when I started doing comedy.
So with those challenges you faced and sort of the mental resilience you needed, was that a time when quite a few aspiring comics maybe took a step back, realizing the reality of what it's like?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people kind of go through it. I've had a lot of friends and peers who have started doing comedy for a few years, taken some years off for other obligations, come back into it. That's just life, man. I mean, as I said, I just basically try to create as much advantage for myself as possible, whereby I was like, I do live at home, which is not ideal, but, my costs are relatively low, and I didn't have any kids at the time, no massive debts. I had a car, which I was leasing. I returned the car. Had a phone, which technically I was leasing, and returned the phone, so I could get like a pay-as-you-go. So, yeah, well, a lot of challenges, but for me, it was kind of like, I guess I studied business at university, so it was almost like I have to look at my, my conduct in this like a business, and work out what my overheads are, and what my expenses are, and how I can minimize those. How can I maximize my contribution to profit and stuff? But to be honest with you, yeah, the first third of my career was more about buoyancy, and my biggest goal was being able to provide for myself. Like the whole comedy thing and performing it, like I said, that's something that I would say is now second part of my nature. So it's never really like, oh, will I be able to perform well or will it be funny? I've always creating material and concepts and that stuff is not something I find difficult, because it never feels like work to me. It's like, again, I've had the privilege of turning my hobby into something I do for a career. So when other comics maybe need to sit down and be like, I need to write some new material today, or I need to do some new stuff. For me, I'm sitting on a bus and I'm just like, or I could be smoking a spliff and go, or eating and be like, oh yeah, because it's just a part of my being. So I'm fortunate in that respect. But yeah, it's just tough. Yeah, it's in a creative arts, if you don't have someone to supplement your career, you don't have an alternate revenue stream, being able to monetize your hobby or your livelihood can be very, very difficult for a lot of people for a very long time. And a lot of my peers now who I still work with, some of them who still enjoy doing comedy, are still working a job at the moment because they've got families to support or mortgages to pay. And I guess they've had to work to find that balance whereby they can still give the intention and love to the art form that they want to, or even just have a casual interest in it, or maybe just run that one gig where they can still interact with the comedy circuit and still perform, as well as taking care of their family obligations. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it can be done. Because my mentality is, I'm someone where I like to work hard and play hard, and I guess I want to apply myself to things where I just feel like if I can do comedy really well and get it out of the way, as I said before, it's like when the other normal social obligations come along, like family and, wife, I can apply the same level of, attention and care that I did to my comedy. That's what I do ideally, but you can never predict what happens in life. So,
yeah, that's true. How long were you on the circuit for, so to speak?
Well, technically, I'm still there, to be honest. Like, that's one of the good things about comedy is that you're never too far away from a gig. Or, for example, the first time I did live at the Apollo, there's a room of 4,000 people. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then the next day, literally the next day, I was back in East London in Bethnal Green doing a room performing to 14 people.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's sad. I wasn't like, oh, it's terrible. That's just comedy. It's the great equalizer. It's being able to perform for that intimate crowd and perform to those like, you know, Apollo's theatres or those stadium crowds. So, yeah, but I say I was on the open mic circuit or grinding circuit probably for about 3 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Before I could say that I had any kind of profile or could earn from it. But I did, yeah, for about 3 years, and I did quite a few competitions which I never won nor was placed in. Get to the finals of them, but I never won or got placed in. So that was like for me to learn that, you know, you don't have the style of comedy that pleases a certain class of people in comedy or a certain contingent of people.
Right.
But even though critics would never see fit for me to, like, you know, be in finals or be placed in any competitions, so far as like being commercially viable and getting bookings, that was always going very well, and I was still getting a lot of club work. And it was kind of ironic because a lot of people were like, if you win this competition, you get to play in this club, and I'll just be playing in it anyway. So it's like, well, I'm already there, so what difference does it make? And it's kind of how that kind of happenstance is how I met my management, where my manager and her husband were like, who were both my dual managers, were running a comedy night in South London. And what they would do is they would, he would organise all the tech and all the microphone and the music. She'd be on the door, and then she could gauge the disposition of the comedians. So if they were rude or dismissive, she would know not to work with them, because at times she was working as a producer. So, you know, if she saw somebody with potential, she could refer them for like development. And I mean, like I said, I study business and I like to pride myself on being a human being. So I treat everybody with respect. Whereas there's some people, if they feel that people can't immediately be instrumental to improving their careers, they don't really regard them with much respect, which I always find insane, because, you know, the runner yesterday will be the producer of tomorrow. So, so I remember with my manager, I was talking about the same thing and just being like, you know, been doing it for like 2 up to 3 years and started to get traction. I wanted to go a bit further. And my manager was kind of like, it's cool, you got this potential. And she was like, referred me to other management companies, and they weren't interested in taking me on. And they felt like they already had like enough black and brown acts, so they didn't need any more. Because this was the state of comedy at the time, as recently as like, you know, 6 years ago. And so I wasn't really worried about it. I was like, I don't really care about who manages me. That's not really the journey, the method of transportation isn't really what I care about. It's the destination. So I just said to my manager, look, I've pretty much done a lot of this stuff for myself. So any places you can get me into or any contacts you may benefit me, you know, you could do that and I'd pay you 15% for those. So it was almost like I was keeping it quite, I suppose, ad hoc for her capacity as an agent. And then, yeah, we started a company, and then she quit her job and was like, no, I'm doing this full time because I want to completely dedicate myself to changing the face of comedy in this country. And so, yeah, she did. And yeah, the rest is, again, the present, where I just started, just started performing. And then I think that's kind of when I made a transition into, I guess, being like full time from about the start of 2014. So I went out to Edinburgh and did like a debut show. And then, or 2013, I was doing a package show. And out of that, like I got my first corporate gig. I did my first television gig as well. So, I'd probably say about 3 years into it. But it varies in terms of what you consider to be the transition, because, as I said, there are some comics who be successful but still pop up in comedy clubs and still perform on the circuit and do festivals every now and again. And there are some comics who you never see on the circuit because they kind of he or she or Z transcended very early on in their careers. So I think for myself personally, I think I was probably doing open mic-ish around just 2.5 years before I started becoming a semi-professional comic. And then, from about 2014 onwards, that's how I went full-time.
Because think about it, 2014 is still not a long time ago. It's still
it's not at all. Yeah.
Early days, you could say, even.
Yeah, absolutely. But man, it's I think 2014 was I was nominated for Best Newcomer in Edinburgh. Yeah. And then it transpired that I was the first Black Briton to be nominated for an award in Edinburgh's entire history. As in, I'm the first Black British person to be nominated for an award in anything to do with Edinburgh. And I was like, well, thank you, but also really? So, yeah, they that garnered quite a bit of attention. And as it does with a lot of newcomers, and if you do find yourself creating a profile in Edinburgh, then a lot of the time, you get the attention of like industry to an extent, but I suppose it's how you convert that into more opportunity. So from 2014 got nominated, 2015 I produced a pilot for BBC's development scheme for new talent for Feed My Funny. And this is also why I say be nice to everyone as well, Callum, because the lovely woman who referred me to BBC's comedy commissioner, she was a runner in 2013.
Oh, wow.
2013, she was doing a BBC showcase, and she was saying to my manager, Dane is the only person that spoke to me like a human being. So shout out Sean, one of my favorite human beings. And she referred Shane Allen, who was the head of commissioning for BBC, to my show. And then that kind of snowballed into the TV op and then getting the pilot. And then the pilot got commissioned. And so I got my show Sunny D to get made on BBC Three.
Yeah.
And that turned out to be the first Black British sitcom on TV in a decade. No, 2 decades. So an entire generation had never seen a black sitcom before. So that happened. And I mean, yeah, it went quite well. Like the feedback was good and stuff. And I wasn't given a second series, which is weird. But then at the same token, some of the actors and actresses in the show had never done TV before. So they'd been like Shakespearean trained actors. And again, you don't normally see black Shakespearean actors or hear of them. I'm sure they definitely exist. Otherwise, they couldn't make Othello. But you don't really hear about it. So they are now doing regular TV work and film work. So that was cool, providing that opportunity to showcase their talent. But yeah, so again, yeah, from 2014 and in 2016 that happened. And then I started touring. And then, yeah, things kind of built there and stuff as well. And it was just, yeah, trying to deliver with a certain level of consistency where, like, yeah, 2015 did the first time I did Live at the Apollo. 2016 was sitcom. 2017 was touring. And also, yeah, then I got to host Live at the Apollo, which was just insane. And yeah, so like I said, 2014, it wasn't really that long ago. But yeah, I guess since then, like I've seen a lot of industrial changes and professional changes in the industry. And yeah, like I said, 2014, no black British person had ever been nominated or recognised for an award in Edinburgh. By 2019, had your first black Briton nominated for Best Show, first black woman nominated for Best Show, first black woman to be nominated for Best Newcomer. So yeah, since then it's all gone down, man, very positively.
Yeah, definitely. That's all in the space of 5 years. So really, you've not just changed your own life, but like I said, you have set the tone. You have...
Tell them, Callum. Yeah. But in a way, it was kind of like, I liked it. It was like the reverse effect that Eminem had, where like he was so cool. He actually, again, was able to legitimize white rappers again. So everyone was like, well, I'm getting a white rapper. I'm getting a white rapper. And so all the agencies that would previously say to my manager, well, we've already got a few black acts. Do we need another one? The ones that didn't have them, or the ones that had them, but just had them there, just, you know, collecting dust, so to speak. People, when they saw me walk out of that dry ice at Live at the Apollo, then everyone was like, well, we're getting a black act because that pays how much grands. And even if that is the motivation for me, that's fine, because it means that, you know, I'm proving we are in a business that black people make money in this business, which was a weird thing you think you'd have to tell people in entertainment. But nonetheless, yeah, I think it definitely changed. Yeah, it's changed the landscape of comedy in this country. Like, you know, one of my friends who was in Sunny D has his own sketch show called Famalam now, which is out in October of this year. So that started there as well. And Bemi, who plays my sister, is also in Famalam. So it's a nice little breaking off how that's kind of working. But yeah, it changed. I mean, my manager and I, like I said, we sat in a coffee shop and we made an agreement to change the face of comedy. And so, like, yeah, there's a lot more personal and financial investment in the arts, so far as, like, you know, entertaining the creatives from, you know, black or desi backgrounds, as well as, you know, a lot more agents realizing the commercial viability and the talent of black creatives. And so a lot of more people getting signed to comedy agencies, and yeah, and there's a lot more, you know, I suppose we're at the cusp of more opportunities being in media as well, which I think is the biggest part. So, but so far as if that began with the trailblazing I did, then I'm massively humbled and just happy, because that's what I wanted. It's always bigger than me. Like I'm here because of people that did it before me, and I just wanted to, like, make sure that I kind of carried the torch as well.
And what you said there about being humbled, how important has that been for you, just to stay humble? And, you know, what's that message mean to you?
It's a good thing, man. It gives me a certain level of peace of mind, man. I don't have to, because I don't have a complex in my head of who I think I am or who I think I should be. It means that I don't have to try and be somebody else, or I don't get defensive if people attack a persona that I've created. So again, I think that's down to upbringing, B, you know, the environment in which I grew up, and also, yeah, and I just think it's very important, and I think it's one of the biggest boons to my comedy career as far as talent is. I've been on the other side of the microphone, so I might be on stage and there might be 18,000 people screaming their heads off. That doesn't make me better than them. I'm at work in it, and just that this is what I do in my job. But what I do is no more important. As we've definitely seen now, there's a lot of key workers who, given the last 6 months, have been crucial to human existence and our harmony and our well-being. And so, I can make people laugh, and they say it's the best medicine. It's just not effective against coronavirus. So,
yeah,
like I would say, yeah, what keeps me humble really, Callum, is the fact that I've got family and friends, and when I come off stage, I'm still the person I am anyway. So yeah, like I've got family WhatsApp groups, and there's never the inclination that what I do is more important than anybody else's job. And also, to be honest with you, Callum, I only grew up in South East London, so if you get a big head, you'll get fucked up. So
yeah.
that's pretty much it.
That's brilliant. That's what I find, especially with comedy, is the comedians that I like the most, I find funniest, are the ones you can relate to. They're relatable, and someone who's
Absolutely
not grounded, someone who's not humble, if you can't relate to them, then how is what they're saying funny? Is that what goes through my mind anyway?
Absolutely, because I'm trying to the payoff for us in terms of our exchange or our energy exchanges for me as an artist and you as an audience member is that, especially with comedy, it's like he's saying what I was thinking, but maybe I was in a situation where I wasn't able to say it, because I guess human convention means that, like, and just some of our own physical limitations. It might be our physical limitations, it might be just our social limitations, where we can't necessarily say what we think all the time. And I believe it's part of my duty, if I'm going to entertain an audience and they're going to indulge me, is that I do that. I say things that people don't want to say or would not normally think. And also, and just, objectively, I guess I just take that idea of being of observation and being objective. And I just try to always approach everything I deal with, as a humble human being. Like, I guess I try and do it like it's my first day on earth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's how I try to approach everything, is that, like, it's either my first day on earth, or I like to call myself as an astronaut on an astral plane. Like, life is like a dream, innit? So nothing really matters in terms of like form and gender and race and stuff, because I guess it's I always try to catch people so far as their consciousness. There's these two windows of, like, it's that nanosecond before people go to sleep, or it's that nanosecond when they wake up. And there's just that little infinitesimal window of our daily stream of consciousness where we don't think about our lives in terms of being a man, a woman, white, black, gay, or straight. Because we think when you dream, you're just seeing what's happening in the dream. You don't rationalize it as a man or as a white man or as a Welsh man until you wake up. You're just a being having an experience. That's how a dream works. And I guess that's almost how I what I'm trying to create, I suppose, artistically with comedy as well, is that just an astronaut taking a walk inside the human mind and trying to, I guess, relay back what I'm seeing to people, like in like Apollo 13 style.
Yeah, that's what I find fascinating is, from doing these podcasts, I learn loads, and I've never thought of it like that. It's never really twigged about the subconscious mind, really, and how that's important.
I think it's just a big part of comedy, is that a lot of the time, the reason why it works so well is that it's things that people have to believe or understand subconsciously, but kind of can't really think about it consciously, because, like I said, your conscious mind is more subject to like suggestion and stuff like that. So once you can pluck something out of someone's subconscious and be like, how did he get here? I wasn't even thinking about it like that way. That's the kind of the biggest payoff, man. And I think that's why comedy works so well, because it's like, you can see stuff that elicits laughter or something where it's like, normally I can't really laugh at this because it's not something you normally laugh at, but there's always just that fine mix of like environment and situation, which creates like a comedic event that wouldn't normally be funny. And also, it's just a massive way we rationalize stuff. I think comedy and laughter, like you said, we were talking about body language, laughter sounds the same in every language. Yeah. And I just feel like, and by that token, it means it's a universal language. So it's just one of the best, great. I think it's just one of the best ways that humans can relate to each other. I think, even though obviously we can misuse the idea of stereotypes and talk about some things, it's like when we do make references about like other groups and we do laugh at it, a lot of time there's a bad side to that, but normally it prefaces lowering guards and breaking the ice and getting to know one another. when, you know, you banter with people, you banter with other football teams and stuff like that, it's normally what is like the boxing match, for example. They make fun of each other and there's all the laughter and they ridicule one another. Then there's the event. But when it's done, there's that emotion where they hug each other and it's like, we've reached this pinnacle of like human interaction and alpha dominance. So now I have to respect you because now I've seen your humanity as well. And I guess comedy trying to approach the same thing as well, is that because laughter, like I said, it's a universal human behavior. So once you get to that, then it's like you can understand any human being once you know what makes them laugh. So,
with your comedy specifically, you talk a lot about culture and race in your comedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. Yeah, because I guess at the time, like I said, 6 years ago, it wasn't really a conversation that people were having, particularly in this country. Like, you know, we're almost like, as I'd go as far as to say, maybe 3 generations behind the States. And, you know, that's just turns into discussion because, like, you know, you look at the US, they've had like, you know, Mom's Mabel, they've had Red Fox, and they've had Richard Pryor, and then Eddie Murphy, then Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle. Now you got like Jared Carmichael and Hannibal Buress. So even now there's like newer acts that are holding their skills. Whereas here, you had Lenny Henry for like comic relief, and that happened when I was a kid. Now my friends have got kids who are starting university, and Lenny Henry's still being like, "Come on, guys." So that just shows you how kind of far back we are. So for me, it was like, again, like I said, I'm aware that there are people who may be older than you that live in South Wales who have little to no experience interacting with black people. And like I said, if there's not been a black sitcom on TV for 20 years, that's 2 decades they've had without a frame of reference to even look at the black lifestyle in the UK. So I had to put it in my material because I was like, I'm aware that this is the lay of the land. And rather than go out on stage and just be like, black people like this, white people like this, I wanted to start creating a whole new narrative where it would almost be from a foundation level understanding of race in this country. And I wanted to do that because, number one, it was because I didn't want to have a narrative where I've been spoiled for cultural indicators and references in London. But for your 3 guys you know in South Wales, unlike me, they can't just go around the corner and go to a Caribbean food shop or go to a takeaway. They can't just go anywhere and go to get their hair cut. If they want to listen to certain music, that's not available to them. But that doesn't mean that their black experience is not valid versus my own. So I wanted to create a narrative whereby I could talk about black experiences in a way that those guys in South Wales will be like, yeah, that's kind of like what I go through as well. So they can relate. Then for the white people living in somewhere like South Wales, their understanding is also very rudimentary. So rather than come on stage and be like, you're dumb, you're racist, and you're dumb, it's like, welcome to black people in Britain. My name is Dane. This is what my life is like. Sometimes it's like this. It's like when your life is like this. And just create this dialogue or this discourse so that, you know, rather than just dismissing white people as racist or Brexiteers or wanting to leave, just create this discourse whereby we can just begin this rudimentary understanding of the black journey, which these people, more than they would probably even think, identify with. Like, if they're people who are fans of sport, they probably have, like, you know, players for their rugby teams or their football teams that they fucking idolize who are black. You know, if they grow up on television, they may see, like, you know, iconoclasts on the BBC who are black, or people in shows, or, you know, musically, they've been growing up on ska or reggae, but they've never really had that. Since then, they've not really had that kind of interaction. So I just wanted to kind of provide that renaissance, I guess a renaissance for the black journey in this country. And again, the reason why as well was because I did a lot of study in terms of, like, you know, race in America and the UK. And I think in the US, one of the reasons they've also been able to kind of prosper more than us is that the African American as a identity is a recognized one. You know what that means. Black Britain is still a relatively new term, and it's also a term that you probably find a lot of black people don't necessarily identify with, because, like, my parents, I was born here, but my parents are from Grenada, and whereas my friend was born here, but his parents are from Jamaica. Now, while he and I will share loads of similarities, our parents will be very quick to point out that there are some differences, in the same way that, like, you know, you may refer to, like, South Wales, but the life in Aberystwyth versus life in Cardiff versus life in Merthyr Tydfil, these are all very different lifestyles. So I didn't want to generalize those. So it's a kind of same token where I guess I'm also trying to work towards giving people an insight to the black British identity. So I think it's a big part of one of the things I want to do is that, like I said, I wanted to create a narrative that, you know, black people in South Wales, black people in London, black people in Leeds, black people in Norwich could all identify with and begin to galvanize that voice. And then, yeah, have opened that door up for even more nuanced voices in that. So, like, you know, so for example, as a black cisgender man, I can't talk about, you know, a black woman's experience. But now the door's open that they've got the rudimentary understanding for myself. Now they can hear it, you know, with a little more detail and a little more like nuance. You know, I can't opine for the LGBT community either. But I just felt like if we can just make people aware, hi, we're black guys, we live in Britain, we're British too. Here's what we do. It's like this when you do it here. Then at least there's an open understanding, and it just leaves the door open for more of that knowledge. And so, yeah, that was kind of my whole thing, was just, you know, giving us as an art form the same level of integrity and the same level of variety and richness that I saw in America.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that ever a worry for you or a concern? Because obviously race can be taken negatively at times. Or was it ever, do you have any concerns about your comedy?
Nah, I kind of, because it's almost as like I said, because in a way, I spent enough time on the other side of the microphone to know that it kind of worked.
Yeah.
And university was like a really good litmus test for me, because like I had 9 friends I lived with, and of that 9, like of my white friends, 2 of them lived in the north, 2 of them lived in the south, so one from Brighton and Cambridge, Barnsley and Doncaster. Then had one friend, and he was Muslim, but he's an Arab versus a Muslim that's Pakistani. So I realized there was a distinct difference there. Another one of my friends is Gujarati, so he's North Indian, but another guy from Sri Lanka, which is obviously South Indian. And it was just interesting to be around that, because then I was aware that, you know, even amongst white people, they have their divisions. We refer to them as like North and South, obviously class divide, religious divide in terms of like Protestant and Catholic. So yeah, it's like, okay, so then there's intraracial conflict that I can match to my experience. And then it's like, okay, cool. There's even interracial conflict amongst Asians from the subcontinent, where, you know, following the partition and stuff, there is a division between Indians and Pakistanis and Kashmiris and Bengalis. And again, it's like, okay, so then you do understand the concept of division, just like what with black people. So again, I was like, well, I can take that knowledge and I can apply it to my own journey. So yeah, I just basically was able to immerse myself in so many different cultures, you know, in some of my more later formative years. Yeah, I didn't worry, because I could just try stuff out on these guys. So if they all get it, then I'm like, okay, well then at least they can get it. And you know, a lot of them at first, took them a while to kind of warm up and understand who I was culturally to an extent. And, you know, so I was like, you know, that took 3 years of study at university. So I kind of applied the same principle that, you know, in 3 years, I could give, you know, Britain and Western Europe on a larger scale an idea of the diaspora journey.
Yeah, that's what I find particularly interesting, is that, well, as you said, you make it relatable to everyone. It's when I'm watching your comedy as a lad from South Wales, I can relate to what you're saying. And that's something that you wouldn't have thought would happen, particularly in the past.
Yeah. And I agree. And I think, yeah, that's the biggest folly of our of media, is this presumption that because on paper you and I don't share any kind of mutual experiences, that we can't relate to one another, which is like, you know, it's completely anti art, and I'm so against it, because I grew up on kung fu movies when I was a kid, and I never looked at kung fu movies and thought there are not enough black people in these, because they were on mainland China, so I don't imagine there were a lot of black people there. So, you know, I could watch The Count of Monte Cristo or The Man in the Iron Mask, and I wasn't like, not enough black people here for me to relate. So, yeah, I think the powers that be that encourage racial division, even though it's not an out and out thing, it's when they're like, well, we know if people can relate to this. It's people that themselves are judging something on a superficial standard than anything else. As I said, I just think, you know, we are all beings and all have the same senses and feelings and stuff. And so I guess, yeah, what I try to do by that token as well with comedy is, rather than me opine on a particular event or a topic, I kind of really talk about the theme of it. So even though, like, so for example, rather than talking about particular stories about political corruption that may involve that prime minister at the time, corruption and political corruption has been a part of our culture for years and years. So rather than just focus on the specifics, if you just focus on the theme, then you can engage with a larger audience, because we can all relate to that. Rather than just talking about this celebrity couple that broke up, I can just talk about celebrity as a phenomenon and love as a phenomenon, and because those are a lot more relatable. And, you know, and I always feel like by talking about that itself, I hopefully encourages an idea where people don't think because they're not famous that their lives are separate to people that are famous, then they have different lives, or these people are better than they are, because that's not the, like I said, it's about humility and commonality. So, you know, if I'm on TV, I'm on TV, but I still get afraid of stuff. I still have to eat all the time to live. I've got to provide for my kids. I still have all of the same complexes that other people have. So I will try and make that a part of my narrative.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your major TV appearances. You know, you've been on Live at the Apollo, London Palladium. What are your feelings like beforehand? Is it the same feelings as any normal gig, or is it something different about being, for example, Live at the Apollo?
I think the first time I did Live at the Apollo, there was that kind of extra, I suppose, the extra peril, the fact that it's like Live at the Apollo for stand-up comics is seen as like our holy grails. So it's a real comedy milestone to achieve it. So yeah, I was just really, again, just super excited to be there, man. Like, I try not to, like I said, try not to think too much about the medium in which I'm traveling. It's more the journey. So I was looking at that. If you have a large audience, I want to say stuff that's cool. How can you best use that? And it's funny as well, because like I said, back to the race thing, I remember my cousin came to watch and he was like, you kind of did a lot of race material. And I guess he felt like he didn't want me to appear to be quite a one-dimensional comic. But I was trying to explain to him, you don't understand, because you grew up in London, you lived in London. I know we take it for granted that because you work with other white people that might know about what I'm talking about. But like I said, for people in South Wales or people in Newcastle or people that are in Darlington or County Durham, they don't know what I'm talking about. So those are the people I have to reach for this kind of material. But yeah, it was cool, man. Like I said, I just I would in never way reduce how significant it was doing Live at the Apollo, but it's just a gig, and I only say that because it's almost to help you perform it like a gig.
Yeah, I can
So
imagine.
I try to keep that same mentality, because, like I said, if you were backstage, Callum, and I was doing a pub gig, I shouldn't behave different to you because I'm at the Apollo or at the O2, because you're still the same guy and I'm still the same guy. So my status for me doesn't change. So yeah, man, it was amazing to be at Live at the Apollo and be at the theater and stuff and have a dressing room and someone asked me what I want to eat for dinner instead of having to like save current buns. So
Yeah,
I used as that frame of reference. I'm like, well, at least someone brings me food instead of me having to like save current buns and satsuma so I don't, pass out from a hunger migraine on the way home from a gig. But other than that, it's just a nice gig, man. It's a gig, and any gig, and I'm happy to perform for 100 people that are there to enjoy comedy, rather than 10,000 people that are less unsure or like fairweather fans. Sorry. So yeah, and Palladium was the same as well, man. Is very daunting and stuff like that. But for the most part, as you said yourself, like most people I interacted with were really cool, man. Like, Bradley Walsh was a really cool guy.
yeah.
I didn't see that coming. I didn't think he'd be a bad person, but no, he was really cool, supportive, and that's always going to be a nice inspiration. That when you see people that are technically at the top of their game, who remain humble, remain focused, never trying to take anyone else down the peg. That's what you're there for. So yeah, it was just a good environment, and it's always nice. Like it's like if you play football and then you start playing with like players of another in a higher league, it takes up your own standard.
Yeah.
So I think that was the nicest part about it, is that it just allowed me to take up my standard and be like, no, you're in the big leagues now, so just have to kind of ease yourself into that.
Yeah, and you appeared on quite a few panel shows as well. So what's that experience like? Because I can imagine that's not the same. It's a bit different to doing a stand-up gig, for example.
Yeah, it's different because it's different timing, and sometimes the way a live studio interacts or reacts to stuff is very different. But I would say, that's probably the biggest challenge, is learning the conversational skill of timing. Of it's not like everyone's listening to you. You say a joke and they laugh. You say your next joke and they laugh. You've got to learn, if someone makes a really good joke, that maybe it's not time to jump in yet. How to bounce off someone else's joke and make it funnier. Not to like interrupt, but be able to cut in and just learn that kind of timing. So I guess it's a small learning, more precise timing. And again, just learning, and also learning to do that and bounce off people I wouldn't normally interact with, because I don't really watch Made in Chelsea, but I was sitting next to Mark Vandelli, and I didn't think I'd have anything in common with Mark Vandelli. I don't have loads in common with him, but at the same time, you can speak to him and be like, well, no, I could very easily have a conversation with this guy. And that's probably large down to the fact that he has had, access to some of the best education on the planet and has had some of the most refined and sophisticated experiences he's had. So, you learn to carry yourself in that way. And I think that's a big, important thing for people to learn in show business as well, is that like how you carry yourself is how people will regard you. So, I never take a low status with people. I always make sure that I'm humble and respectful, and always open to listening to learn more about how I can improve myself. But at the same time, you know, I don't care if I'm sitting next to Beyonce. Like, she's not better than me. We're both on this panel show. Especially if it's a comedy panel show, then I know what I'm doing. So, yeah, I try to take that approach. And, you know, you hear horror stories about panel shows and how people get like shouted out or they get hazed and stuff to prove that they should be on there. So when I hear those things, I mean, it probably makes me a bit more wary of how I should prepare. But yeah, I just never tried to visit that on anybody, man. I'm like I said, I'm always, I guess it's no longer I'm on the other side of the microphone, but I've been in that other seat in the green room. So I'm like, I know what it's like to be the newest person in there. And so I always try to create an environment where no one feels uncomfortable or inferior.
Have you got a highlight, whether that's from TV or just from the circuit? Have you got a highlight of your career or a few even?
Oh yeah, definitely a few. So the ones I'd say for me is I opened for Bill Burr in Belgium. That was a highlight for me. That was crazy. Opened for Eddie Griffin in Belgium and in the Netherlands as well. I was in Rotterdam and in Brussels, so that was cool. Live at the Apollo definitely has to be a milestone for me. Palladium was real good too. But yeah, there's been so many, man. But like I said, for me, it's like I said, kind of. There's been so many highlights career wise, and like I've had my own fucking TV show, innit? I should probably sound a lot more enthusiastic. But like I said, for me, it's just every day. Like I get to do what I like for a living now, and I never thought I'd be able to. Not because I couldn't allow to, but it's just I had never seen it before. So I'd never seen someone that looked like me saying what I was saying on television. So yeah, it's for me. It's like the highlight is always, like I said, that people will call me and want to pay me to do something I enjoy in it. And there's such a rarity on this planet that yeah, I just I grab it with two hands. So there's been lots of milestones, but overall, it's just like I said, it's been being able to do what I love has been the highlight of the whole thing.
Yeah. What about your own tours? As obviously, your tours are taking you worldwide, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying as well, man. It's like that just adds to it as well. Is that touring is amazing. That people are just coming to listen to you for an hour. So obviously getting over that initial kind of thing was amazing. But for me, yeah, it's definitely just been like I used to work in sales, and a lot of people would do business trips, and people would travel, and I never really got to that point in my career where I could do that. And I also felt like I didn't ever want to do travel under those pretenses.
Yeah.
Because I just think it's hard enough for me to even blag that I even want to be in a boardroom giving a meeting. Doing that in another country, I'm just going to struggle. So, yes. So again, via comedy, I've been to places I probably would never have been to as well had I not been doing comedy. Like Finland and Estonia were never really on the bucket list, but love going there now. I performed in Poland, Norway, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Canada, United States. Where else? Germany. I missed anywhere? Oh, Latvia. Did in Latvia as well. And I was supposed to this year, depending on how lockdown goes, I'll be in hopefully in Iceland this year, and again I'll be doing Denmark this year, and where else? And yeah, and potentially like some gigs around Indonesia and stuff.
Oh wow!
So yeah, and like I said, that kind of thing there, where it's like that's not going to have anywhere near necessarily, Live at the Apollo numbers, but if you get to perform in Kuala Lumpur, then why wouldn't you? So it's just been cool, man. Like the international thing's been cool, and again, it's been so valuable to the narrative because it means you're seeing. And I think you definitely notice in comedy that as your horizons broaden, your experiences get broader, then that will feed into your material. So I think my early comedy for maybe the first year of comedy would have been longer than 10 minutes and no further than 2 miles outside of my immediate radius. Whereas now, because I've been able to traverse the globe, my material has taken on a lot more of a global sensibility to it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just personal question really from me is, when do you decide to tour? What makes you think now's a good time to tour? Like, where does that idea come from? Is there a good time to do it or a bad time?
I'm sure there's bad times. Planning one this year would have been terrible.
Yeah.
But I think it was just like a natural progression whereby I'd been performing the sold out run in Edinburgh, And I guess after 2 sold out runs, it proves that obviously you have an audience that will come and see you. Obviously, people will go to Edinburgh to come and see you, and then they're following live at the Apollo. So with that kind of like, I suppose, upswing in followers and audience, it was kind of like forward to see more of Dane in his entirety than come on tour. So yeah, just worked with at the time I was working with Bound and Gagged, and yeah, it was just the right time to kind of get out there. And I guess even in itself, it was a litmus test to find out if there is the audience to support me touring as well. So I guess the best time to tour would be when you feel like you've got an audience, is the short answer to the question. If you feel like you've got an audience that can fill a room, then that's the right time to tour. And I guess now you have a lot more quantitative ways of measuring it, where you can do like, I want to say Bandcamp, I don't think that's the right one, but basically you've got a lot of digital aggregators on the site that can show you how many fans you have in particular regions. Oh, sorry, 1 second. So there are a lot of people in where you can see by region where people want to go. You can kind of see by, even as close as what villages and what people spend, how much money on you and how long you're listened to for through digital media. So because you can do that, it's you can just go wherever you want. And even if it's not on the beaten path of where most normal people will tour, if you have your audience there, that's where you go. So I'd say, the answer to the question in terms of touring is that if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I never knew you could do that, really. I've always wondered why certain comedians choose certain places, which, as you said, are off the beaten track. But, well, that's why now. That's got my question answered.
It's weird because they've got that audience there. And, sometimes you think there's some audience places where you're like, this audience, I think I had to do some kind of trial and error to work out which audiences were really good and which weren't and which weren't. And I think I use a lot more digital methods now to kind of work it out. So it's a lot easier to work it out but yeah, as soon as you got audience, I'd say get out there.
Yeah, definitely. So what's next for you as we come to the end of the interview? What have you got planned for the future?
So for me, it's really just being able to be a responsible human being as we assert our right to exist with Black Lives Matter as a human being, and as well as kind of, I guess, getting rehabilitated into out of post-lockdown. So those are my primary things. And then so far as comedy work and stuff, like hoping for, depending on how things go, may resume the tour at the end of the year. Also just finding new ideas and new content. So I'm working on some new content, some video, some animations, and just putting that out as well, because I'm aware that now, should the occasion rise, and it's happening anyway, but maybe somewhat accelerated, where as we're moving a lot more to consuming digital media and we kind of engage with a lot more online personalities. So I'm just kind of working on my brand on that and just creating new stuff that people can find online. And then, and other than that, just regular stuff, man. Get back to gigging, working on content. My podcast is called Dane Baptiste Questions Everything. So that's getting bigger as well. So just working on those things, man. But just, keep creating. I just keep it pretty loose, Callum, man, because you never know what can happen in this world, innit? So I kind of just keep doing what I enjoy, keep gigging, keep writing, performing.
Yeah, it's as easy as that. Really, just
pretty much. Because the thing is, comedy, like one of the best lessons I got from a comedian is that you have to first be able to laugh at yourself and also not take yourself too seriously. So what's next for me is that, I don't know, whatever comes my way, I'll just do some jokes and stuff. But I like I said, I enjoy doing comedy is my hobby as well as my career now. I'm very fortunate to say that. So as far as what's coming next, who knows? But I'll try to write some jokes about it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, Dane, thank you so much for being on the show. Honestly, it's been my pleasure. Now, last question, I promise. Have you got any messages, words of wisdom? What advice would you give to my listeners, really? Is my last question.
I would definitely say, man, that don't take shit too seriously. And God is love, man. And the world is a joke. The planet is not. And we were here as people, and before there was like society and shit. And we will endure and be fine, man. So don't take shit too seriously, guys, because it'll be over in a flash. And God is love.
That's perfect. Honestly, it's been my honor to have you on the show.
No, thank you, man. Dane. It's been a pleasure. No problem, Callum, man. Cheers.